Welcome back to Haunted Index, where every story holds a secret. Today, I've got 4 tales lined up that will keep you hooked until the very end. So grab your headphones, dim the lights, and let's dig in with the first one.
I was forced to watch 10 teenagers kill each other. I couldn't recall anything before the White Room, only the sharp sting of disinfectant in my nose and the low drone of a fan above me. When I woke, I was lying face down on icy tiles, cheek pressed into a sticky patch of drool. My name came back instantly. Mary. I knew I was 38 years old, but nothing else. Not where I was from, not why I was here. The space around me was blindingly sterile. 4 white walls, nothing but a glass table and 4 bulky old television sets stacked in front of me. The kind of outdated models from the 90s, each with a built-in VCR, screen buzzing with faint static. I croaked out, demanding to know where I was, my tongue coated with sour spit. No answer. The ceiling lights sputtered, plunging me into heavy darkness. It forced my attention to the glowing shapes in front of me. On the glass table, a steaming cup of coffee and a single cookie sat waiting, as though someone had known I'd wake up. For several minutes, I stayed still, frozen on my knees, my brain clawing for scraps of memory that weren't there. It was like someone had torn my life into puzzle pieces and tossed most of them away. Instinctively, I began checking my head for injuries, palpating my skull, rubbing for swelling, testing my balance. I knew how to do that far too well, almost like second nature. That told me something. I must have worked in medicine, or maybe it was just habit. But the queasy burn in my stomach whispered something else, that I had been here before, that this wasn't the first time. The revulsion rising in my throat didn't make sense. My hands trembled as though they remembered more than I did. I wasn't hurt, no concussion, no blood. Still, I wanted out. My eyes darted to 2 cameras in opposite corners of the ceiling. I was being watched. I yanked at the door handle. Locked. I screamed myself hoarse. Nothing. Only silence that grew so oppressive it seemed to press against my ears. Then I saw the pile of tapes balanced on the VCR. The first one, marked in thick black letters, Feb 2024. The plastic felt clammy in my hands, strangely familiar, almost comforting, like I'd touched it before. I slid it into the machine and hit play. The 4 screens blinked alive. A group of teenagers appeared. 10 of them. 5 boys, 5 girls. 17, maybe 18. Their room was almost identical to mine, but smaller, emptier. No table, no coffee, just bare walls and a lone bucket shoved in a corner. They were confused, frightened, stripped down to matching white tees and shorts, blending into the blankness around them. When a blonde girl suddenly started pounding the walls, shrieking, I felt my stomach clench. Another girl, brunette, strode over and slapped her. Instead of fighting back, the blonde collapsed into her, sobbing. I leaned in, watching the rest. They sat in a shaky circle, eyeing each other like strangers. Because that's what they were, strangers. And like me, none of them seemed to remember who they were. I pounded at my own walls, throat raw, praying they were close by, maybe right next door. But then I froze. This wasn't live. The grainy picture, the timestamp, these tapes were records, pieces of their captivity, spooled out in hours I was forced to consume. I shoved in the next one, March 2024. My gut twisted. I couldn't escape the feeling I was being made to watch this. The footage showed their first weeks locked inside. They adapted quickly, creating bathroom curtains from clothing scraps, distracting themselves with games, rationing food when it dwindled. One boy, tall and freckled, tried to rally them. He didn't remember his name, but I called him boy number 1. He scratched at his arms nervously, but spoke like a leader. The others gravitated towards him despite his trembling lip. A naming ceremony followed. They gave themselves identities. Boy number 1 chose Clem. Another boy called himself Ryder. Others Buzz, Z, Shitface. The girls too: Sabrina, Ruby, Scooby, Brianna, Mittens. It was surreal watching these children reinvent themselves in captivity. By April, the cracks showed, food withheld, lights flickering in cruel patterns, and then the delivery through the slot. Not food, a weapon, a pickaxe. I gripped the table, bile stinging my throat as Clem hurled it against the wall, spitting at the cameras. "We're not that crazy yet," he sneered. But starvation gnawed at them. 3 days passed without meals. Their eyes hollowed. They started looking at the axe differently. In the dark, with no light, Shitface picked it up. His voice was unsteady, but eager. "Why not kill one of us to survive?" The others screamed, but panic was already spiraling. Then Clem took the axe and without hesitation swung it, burying the blade in Sabrina's neck. I tried to stop the tape, but my body refused to move. Her blood painted the white tiles scarlet. The boy's face was hollow, empty, until he smiled. "If they won't feed us, we'll feed them." From there, everything unraveled. Clem smeared her blood on the wall, scrawling a smiley face. The others recoiled in terror. But when meals arrived the next morning, lavish ones, the unspoken truth was clear. Murder was rewarded. The following tapes blurred together, months of them, sometimes blank, sometimes nothing but Clem grinning at the camera, his face hollow, his teeth streaked red, a crown of bone on top of his head in later footage. When I finally slid in the April 24 tape, something different happened. The kids reacted to me. Clem tilted his head, ear against the wall, his eyes narrowed. "It's a woman," he muttered, and I screamed back, pounding the walls, desperate for them to hear me. It wasn't possible. These were old recordings. But the tape cut out with all 9 teens staring directly into the lens, directly at me. By the time I reached the final cassette, the door clicked open. I stumbled out into a sterile hallway of identical doors before being ushered through an emergency exit into a waiting car. It drove me home, and that's when the memories hit. My husband Harry, pale and shaking, clutching posters. My golden retriever bounding towards me, Clem. And in our kitchen, trays of cookies and cupcakes decorated with icing words. "Have you seen this boy?" My son's face smiling up from every flyer. Zach, the boy with freckles, the boy I'd just watched drown in blood, the boy they had made me forget. My boy.
And that wraps up the first story. Hope you liked it. Now, let's move straight into the second one.
My dad's connections killed me. My father's friend always had influence. Whenever our family ran into the smallest problem, it disappeared, as if it had never existed. When Mom lost her job, she was promoted to an even better one within hours. When Grandpa was diagnosed with aggressive brain cancer, he was suddenly declared healthy just a week later. It felt like magic, like we had our own personal guardian angel. All Dad had to do was call his old buddy Marcus and strings got pulled. Invisible strings. I used to joke that when Marcus died, his funeral would probably have a man in a black suit holding a black umbrella watching from the back row. Dad would just laugh it off. But as the years went on, Marcus solved everything. My brother was accepted into Harvard, even though he hadn't even graduated high school. He wasn't valedictorian, not even close. Yet, somehow, he was at the top of the Ivy League, courtesy of Marcus's connections. I figured, if life was that easy, why even try? I dropped out of college my first year and got a job at the mall. I wanted to be a photographer, not a surgeon. But Dad wanted both his children to wear white coats. Even Marcus pulled some strings to get me into one of the best medical schools in the country. But I told them no. I couldn't handle blood. I fainted during horror movies. How the hell was I supposed to slice someone open? Dad was furious, but oddly quiet. He told me Marcus could put me in another school overseas if I wanted, but I refused. I wanted to make my own way. Dad wouldn't let it go. I asked if Marcus could find me a summer internship in photography. Dad said no. Both his children were going to be doctors. That was the deal. I didn't like it. It was his dream, not mine. Meanwhile, my brother Dexter was already on the fast track to surgery. The crazy part, just a year before, he was planning to run away with his girlfriend, Elena, to pursue acting. Then, out of nowhere, he dumped her, dumped his dream, and became obsessed with medicine. It was like he'd been rewired overnight. I hadn't heard much from him since. He ignored my texts, never called. When he did pick up, his voice was distant, all business, all study. At Thanksgiving, he sat at the table like some stranger in a suit, talking about being top of his class. That wasn't Dex. The real Dex hated being boxed in, hated being categorized. He hated Harvard. He hated Dad's control. Yet here he was, parroting Dad's pride like a robot. I joked at the table that he didn't even graduate high school, and Dad nearly choked on his turkey. Mom's face froze into a fake smile as she sipped her wine. Dex didn't speak to me after that. The boy who used to leave me handwritten notes hidden in my room, telling me I'd be okay, was gone. I went looking in his old room one day. All I found was his half-filled application for a New York acting school, crumpled and coffee-stained under movie posters. His name scrawled in messy letters. That was my brother, scattered, creative, alive, not the automaton who came home on holidays. Then one night, Dad shook me awake at 2 a.m. "Get dressed," he said flatly. Still wrapped in my blanket, I shuffled into the car, half asleep, my head lolled against the cold window as Dad drove. At first I thought maybe this was some kind of father-daughter bonding trip, but the further we drove, the more dread pooled in my stomach. Dad hated leaving town. Yet here we are, winding down empty Virginia backroads in the dead of night. No streetlights, just endless darkness. "Where are we going?" I whispered. He cranked up the radio. No answer. Panic settled in my chest. My phone was dead. My body told me to leap from the car and run, but I froze. When I reached between the seat cushions by habit, my fingers brushed paper. I pulled it out and squinted at the handwriting under a passing streetlight. It was Dex's old messy scrawl. One word. Run. My heart lodged in my throat. I glanced at Dad. He was humming. He said, "We're going shopping." At 2 a.m.? I didn't believe him. We finally stopped near a warehouse by a lake. The building rose like a silver block against the night, faceless and sterile. Guards stood at the door. Dad grabbed my hand, gentle but firm. He flashed an ID card and led me inside. And for a moment, relief flooded me. It really was a store. A massive labyrinth of aisles under bright lights, food, snacks, medical supplies, diapers, college textbooks, like a Costco on steroids. But the deeper we went, the more things changed. The shelves warped into grotesque displays, vacuum-packed organs, rows of bones, flesh sealed in plastic. I wanted to vomit, but Dad tugged me along. Then we turned a corner, and I froze. Bodies. Not mannequins, people, lined up like cattle. Some alive, trembling, with tubes in their arms, their skin marked with red pen and price tags. Others, just pieces. Hearts on ice, skulls in jars. My knees buckled. "Dad, what is this?" He didn't answer. He stopped in front of a bright display labeled Intelligence, 17 to 25. A smiling picture of teenagers mid-laugh, with the caption, "Give your children the greatest gift." Standing under the sign was a boy. Blonde brown hair, pale skin, freckles, a sloppy grin stretched across his face. His IQ written across his forehead in marker. Drugged, hollow-eyed, a puppet. The shopkeeper bragged, "This one's name is Ben. Brilliant kid. Cambridge graduate. Tried to end his life on Christmas Eve, so tragic. But hey, his loss is your gain." My stomach lurched. I thought of Dex, his sudden shift, his blank smile, his perfect handwriting. Had this happened to him? Had my brother been hollowed out like this? I screamed. The guards grabbed me. Dad told them not to hurt me. "I'll take him," Dad said flatly, nodding at Ben. "How much?" "Special discount, $9.50. The shopkeeper laughed. "Of course, remember, sometimes fragments linger after transfer. Little pieces of the old self. We call it revival. Rare, but it happens." Dad just nodded like he was buying a used car. My blood went cold. This wasn't happening, but it was. They pinned me down, injected me, marked my forehead. I tried to scream, tried to beg my father. He only whispered that I'd thank him someday. "Be brave, Lily. You'll be just like your brother." I fought until my body gave out, until the saw's whine filled my ears, until I blacked out counting numbers. And when I woke, the world was different. The room was gone. I was in a soft bed, sunlight warming my face. My father hugged me, smiling. "Sweetie, you're perfect now." But I wasn't Lily anymore. I walked home with him, smiling through bandages around my skull, listening to a voice that wasn't mine anymore. The real Lily was gone. I was Ben, and I wanted revenge. That night, I slit my father's throat while he slept. He should have been awake for it. He should have felt every cut, just like I did. I torched the house, watched the flames eat everything. Now Lily whispers in my head, sometimes soft, sometimes screaming. I tell her I'm sorry. Sorry I took her body. Sorry her dad sold her life for perfection. Sorry Marcus exists. And she whispers back, "It's okay, Ben." But I know it isn't, because I didn't want to die, and neither did she.
That was our second tale. Creepy, right? Let's keep the momentum going. Here comes story number 3.
The empty desks. I switched schools in the middle of the term. The classroom buzzed with chatter and laughter, everyone clustered into their own little groups. I slipped in quietly, unnoticed, and settled into the very last row. Being the kind of person who struggled to speak up, I thought that was for the best. The desk beside mine was occupied by a girl. At first, I thought she was just another quiet student like me, but then I realized something strange. Throughout the entire lesson, no one so much as glanced in her direction. No one greeted her. No one whispered to her. It was as though she didn't exist to anyone else. I kept debating with myself, unsure if I should break the silence, when she suddenly turned and gave me a small, gentle smile. "You must be new here, right?" she asked softly. That one question felt like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. My nervousness, the loneliness of being the new kid, all of it seemed to dissolve. I nodded, smiling back, and the awkwardness vanished as if we had always known each other. Over the next days, she became my first real companion. She waited for me during breaks and insisted I come with her to the cafeteria. We'd share a sandwich, or she'd hand me half a carton of milk. After class, we walked down the cobbled path outside the gates, her voice carrying me through with silly stories and casual laughter. Even in the library, she'd drag a chair to sit beside me, sliding half of an open book my way. We whispered, trying not to disturb the others, but somehow our hushed exchanges were the brightest part of my day. I'd always struggled to make friends, but with her, everything felt natural. Whenever I looked up, she was already there, watching, smiling lightly, waiting for me to notice her. For the first time since transferring, I felt like I belonged. That night, however, my sleep was restless. My dreams were foggy, unsettled, as though something heavy pressed against my chest. I kept tossing and turning, haunted by the sensation of being observed. It was so vivid I couldn't ignore it. My eyes snapped open. And there, by my window, she was standing. My blood ran cold. My breath hitched. How could she be here? How had she slipped into my house? Why was she in my room in the middle of the night? But the shock didn't last. Strangely, a wave of calm swept over me, as if her presence made sense, as if she was supposed to be there. "What are you doing here?" I whispered. Her eyes, dark and unreadable, met mine. She stepped forward, her voice distant, fragile, like a song drifting on the wind. "I'm leaving soon, somewhere very far away. I don't want to go alone. Will you come with me?" Her hand reached toward me. It was cold, unnervingly cold, yet I took it without hesitation. My doubts, my fears, gone. All that remained was trust. I rose from my bed, following her across the room. The silence was absolute, broken only by the faint creak of the window opening. The moment my foot crossed the ledge, crash! The world shattered. Pain exploded through my body as I slammed into the ground below. Warm blood spread beneath me, the icy pavement swallowing me whole. My lungs burned, my vision dimmed, and in the haze of dying consciousness, I saw her figure above, framed by the window. Calm, serene, that same faint smile lingering on her lips. The boy's death shocked the entire school. When teachers and classmates pieced together what they remembered, a chilling pattern emerged. From his first day, he had been different. He always sat in the back row, right beside a desk that had long been abandoned. During lessons, students noticed him turn toward that desk, nodding, smiling, sometimes even whispering and laughing softly, as if someone invisible sat there. One girl admitted, trembling, "During recess or after school, I'd see him walking across the yard, holding out his hand, like he was holding someone else's, but he was always alone. It was terrifying." Soon the whispers began. That desk had belonged to another student, a girl who, years ago, had ended her life by leaping from the school roof after relentless bullying. Her seat had remained untouched ever since. The realization made the classroom grow heavy with fear. No one dared glance toward that corner anymore. And now, with his death, another desk beside hers sat empty. 2 seats, side by side, cursed. No one wanted to sit there. No one even wanted to look. Weeks later, a new transfer student arrived. The classroom door creaked open. Everyone held their breath, eyes wide, watching closely. The newcomer stepped in quietly, his gaze lowered, his footsteps deliberate. He walked to the very back of the room, and then he stopped, right before the 2 empty desks. The silence was suffocating. The air seemed to curdle. Some students swore later that they saw faint shadows already seated there, smiling faintly, waiting for him. From that day on, the corner of the classroom seemed darker. And some nights, students passing by the school swore they saw 3 silhouettes framed in the window of that room, 2 girls and a boy, sitting side by side, smiling down into the empty yard.
And with that, the third story comes to an end. But don't relax just yet. The fourth one might just be the most chilling of them all.
My parents are holding human auctions inside our basement. Dad's had friends in our basement since I was a little kid. The one rule in our household was to never question them. Ever. Sneaking choosy. An upbeat song on the radio. I was feeding chocolate chip in my hair from my face. I only had to see the silhouette of my, especially new friends. Mom slammed the oven shut and situating herself and noticed my mother's frantic eyes. Mouse. Dad strode through the door, his arms wrapped around a girl who was soaking wet. Her shoes were filled with rainwater, squelching with every step. "Don't say a word," he grunted to the girl. She moved like a puppet, one foot, her head jerked up, features, and made-up eyes, a mouth that I knew was used to gaze to my lap. In the corner of my eye, 2 figures followed. They were younger, my older cousin's age. The 3 of them were college-aged. I glimpsed intricate black lines tainting one of the boy's arms, creeping all the way down to his wrist and tangling around, protruding the gun into one of the guys' heads. Mom told gaze, admiring my cookies. The one at the very edge of the tray was a funny-shaped heart. I could sense my sharp breaths, my hand clammy, and my voice surprised me, a low murmur. "And if I don't, old man, what you gonna do to me?" Suddenly too far aware of my father clicking off the safety. Still gives me nightmares. "You know what I'll do." His other friends were teenagers too. He took 3 girls into the basement several weeks prior, and they were yet to come back up. I was still waiting for them to appear, the knots in my tummy getting worse as the weeks went by. I liked Dad's other friends. They didn't have names, and even if they did, Dad refused to tell me. There was a hard-faced brunette, a dazed-looking freckly blonde who kept asking me where her parents were, and my favorite, who had pigtails like me, until she lost all of her hair. I also nicknamed them Scary Eyes, Freckles, and Pigtails. When I asked Pigtails where all her hair had gone, her eyes darkened, but she didn't say anything. The 3 girls were sick. Their colors reminded me of my favorite cartoon, Blossom. Freckles coughed spluttered red into her hands. Bubbles. Pigtails couldn't walk straight, yellow froth bubbling through her lips and down her chin. Buttercup. Scary Eyes' teeth were black, like she was chewing candy. I wondered if my dad's friends were dying. The girl's skin was pale, ghostly, almost translucent. When Mom and Dad were at work, sometimes the 3 came upstairs. They were getting sicker. Scary Eyes had to hold on to Pigtails, the 2 of them stumbling up the stairs. Freckles was wearing a metal crown thing that she couldn't tear off. Dad told me my friends were sick, and he was going to make them better. I thought they were going to run away, but they just ate cookies and drank soda, like they hadn't eaten or drank in days, asking me questions I didn't understand. Freckles tried to call someone, but the phone was dead. Scary Eyes asked me if I had a computer or cell phone, and I told her I wasn't allowed them because I was too young. She started to get mad, her expression twisting. "Well?" Scary Eyes had a lot of nosebleeds.
She asked me what her name was, and I told her it was Scary Eyes. I don't think she liked that response. She got angry, throwing a vase at me, though I don't remember her actually touching it or picking it up. I was standing very still, watching her swipe blood from her nose, and then my mother's favorite vase was flying into my face. Before it could hit me, the girl dropped to her knees with a cry, and the vase hit the ground, shattering into pieces. Pigtails hugged her, calming her down with whispered assurances. "Get off of me!" Scary Eyes shoved her away, Wild Eyes landing on me. "Well!" Pigtails had a lot of nosebleeds. She asked me what her name was, and I told her it was Scary Eyes. I don't think she liked that response. She got angry, throwing a vase at me, though I don't remember her actually touching it or picking it up. I was standing very still, watching her swipe blood from her nose, and then my mother's favorite vase was flying into my face. Before it could hit me, the girl dropped to her knees with a cry, and the vase hit the ground, shattering into pieces. Pigtails hugged her, calming her down with whispered assurances. "Get off of me!" Scary Eyes shoved her away, Wild Eyes landing on me. "Well!" Pigtails had a lot of nosebleeds. She asked me what her name was, and I told her it was Scary Eyes. I don't think she liked that response. She asked me what her name was, and I told her it was Scary Eyes. I don't think she liked that response. She got angry, throwing a vase at me, though I don't remember her actually touching it or picking it up. I was standing very still, watching her swipe blood from her nose, and then my mother's favorite vase was flying into my face. Before it could hit me, the girl dropped to her knees with a cry, and the vase hit the ground, shattering into pieces. Pigtails hugged her, calming the girl down with whispered reassurances. "Get off of me!" Scary Eyes shoved her away, Wild Eyes landing on me. "Why can't we leave?" she demanded in a shriek. I told them I didn't know. "Where's the off switch?" Freckles could hardly stand up, her arms wrapped around her stomach, doubled over in pain. She tried to open the sliding glass doors, but they were locked. So was the door to the upstairs. The girls were scaring me. Scary Eyes was stifling a nosebleed, intense red seeping through her fingers. Freckles grabbed me, shaking me violently. Her face was slick red, too red like she was painted in it. "Kid, how the fuck do we get out of here?" "She's a kid," Pigtails said softly. "Go easy on her. It's not her fault." "Then what are we supposed to do?" They were my father's patients, I thought, as a naive 6-year-old. They were too sick to go home, just like Dad told me. Pigtails gave me her ID card, in secret. She told me to get help, squeezing my hands tightly. Her blood-slicked hands were warm and wet. When I tried to tug away, she pressed her ID into my grasp, the plastic corner digging into my skin. Pigtails' eyes were glassy, seeping, red streaked with black, dripping from her nose. She was crying. "You need to be brave for me, Rosie, because if you're not, we're not going to be okay." When I nodded, she wrapped her arms around me. "Can you give this to the cops and tell them we're here?" she whispered. "That's all you need to do, sweetie." When I told Dad, he asked me to give it to him instead. "Denial is a common side effect of their illness," he told me. "They think they need to get out, and they think they're in danger, when in reality I'm saving them from their own poisoned minds." He cleared his throat, swiping his hands on a tower. Some poisoned minds, however, cannot be fixed. I asked Dad what Pigtails' real name was. Dad smiled behind the surgical white of his mask, slipping the girl's ID into his pocket. "Well, what do you like to call her?" he said, washing his scarlet-stained hands in the kitchen sink. Sitting on the countertop, I swung my legs, nibbling on a cookie. Dad was always covered in tomato sauce after coming up from the basement. "Pigtails," I said, "just like mine." Dad ruffled my hair. "Then that's her name." I found the girl's ID in the trash a few weeks later, along with the others. Their real names were Violet, Risa, and Clementine. I never saw my father's friends again. Dad was busy for the rest of the week, bringing up trash bags from the basement. Mom was crying and wouldn't leave her room. I thought the girls would come back up the stairs, all better. But they didn't. I waited outside the door with cookies every day, but the basement stayed shut. And now Dad was replacing them with 3 new friends. Brand new friends. Initially, I wasn't fazed. I was a kid, so I figured the 3 had gone home without me realizing. But now Dad was bringing in new friends, and my tummy was starting to twist. I was aware of my mother situating herself in front of me. Her eyes were dark, underlined with shadows. I watched my father drag the soaking wet Earl toward the basement door, the boys following in slow strides. Dad's new friends didn't look happy to be in our kitchen. The 3 of them looked like they had been to the beach. The girl was wearing shorts and a tee, feet bare, her hair hanging in thick clumps in front of her eyes. One of the guys wasn't even wearing a shirt, only long-cut shorts, Ray-Bans perched on thick brown hair. The other, hiding behind sandy-colored curls, wore a short-sleeved tee, a beach towel still wrapped around him. Dad must have picked them up at the beach. Before I could break the rules and question who they were, Mom grabbed my face gently and turned my head to look at her. In the corner of my eye, one of the guys dropped to his knees, and my dad wrapped his hand around his shoulder, yanking him to his feet. "Fucking move, boy." Dad's voice was a low growl I didn't know. "Rosie?" Mom's voice cut through the silence. She tightened the grip on my face, her nails sticking into my skin. It hurt, but I didn't tell her that. Mom's hands moved down to cradle my cheeks. "Keep your eyes on me, baby," she whispered, her eyes wide. "Okay?" I did, tearing my gaze off the dark-haired boy who dropped his glasses. The sound of them hitting the ground made me wince.
One of the guys wasn't even wearing a shirt, only long-cut shorts, Ray-Bans perched on thick brown hair. The other, hiding behind sandy-colored curls, wore a short-sleeved tee, a beach towel still wrapped around him. Dad must have picked them up at the beach. Before I could break the rules and question who they were, Mom grabbed my face gently and turned my head to look at her. In the corner of my eye, one of the boys dropped to his knees, and my dad wrapped his hand around the boy's shoulder, yanking him to his feet. "Fucking move, boy." Dad's voice was a low growl I didn't know. "Rosie." Mom's voice cut through the silence. She tightened her grip on my face, her nails sticking into my skin. It hurt, but I didn't tell her that. Mom's hands moved down to cradle my cheeks. "Keep looking at me," she whispered, her eyes wide. "Okay?" I did, tearing my gaze from the dark-haired boy who dropped his glasses. The sound of them hitting the ground made me wince. I watched him duck down to pick them back up, before my father stamped on them. "Rosie!" Mom said my name again. I felt her fingers grasping my arm. Her voice sounded strange, like waves crashing onto a shore. The boy straightened up and did exactly what my father told him. "Hey," Mom hummed. "Eyes on me, baby." Mom and I talked about my favorite cookies until my words were tangled on my tongue and I couldn't talk anymore. And behind me, the basement door opened. One shadow was shoved through, and then another. The final shadow strayed back for a moment, and I felt his eyes burning into the back of my head. I sensed his slow steps, dragging himself, before my dad dragged him through. The door slammed shut, and I immediately twisted around, jumping from my seat to pick up the broken glasses. Mom's arms were wrapping around me, pulling me to her chest. She was trembling. "Okay, sweetie." Her voice was the comfort I needed. "Why don't we decorate our cookies?" Dad's newest friends became a permanent part of our family. Their screams kept me awake at night, but Dad assured he was just playing games with them. They didn't age. I turned 7 and then 8 years old, my birthdays coming and going, and Dad's friends looked exactly the same. Unlike with the others, I was allowed to talk to them. The basement door was always open, so after dinner, I grabbed as many snacks as possible and slid down cold concrete steps. The 3 of them were behind a big glass screen, like a human zoo. Dad told me they were sick and he was making them better. At first, Dad's friends were boring. All they did was cry. The girl sat in the corner with her arms wrapped around her legs, head sandwiched in her lap. She was wearing different clothes, a stained white shirt and pants. I thought she suited her other clothes better. At least Dad was looking after them, letting them change. The boys wore light blue, more akin to hospital scrubs. I noticed the pretty black lines on one of the boys' arms were gone, strips of stained white wrapped around his wrists. I started to call them dark hair and gold hair in my head. Dark hair lay on his back and stared at the ceiling. Gold hair curled up like a cat, his face buried in his knees. The more I visited them, the sicker my dad's new friends looked, like they were being drained of life, all of the color sucked from their cheeks. The exact same thing had happened to Dad's other friends, though Freckles' skin was almost see-through the last time I saw her. Her eyes were glassy, and I wasn't even sure she could understand me. Scary Eyes spat out streaks of deep black. Pigtails was too sick to stand up. Dad's new friends weren't at that stage yet, but they were close. Dark hair had stopped acknowledging me completely. His eyes found nothing. No one. Not even me when I kicked the glass. It was in their eyes, too. When Dad first brought them in, the 3 of them were vocal, screaming at me, pounding on the glass. Mom told me they were in denial that they were sick. In their heads, they thought my father was imprisoning them. "It is an illness of the brain, Rosie," she told me. But as days and weeks and months went by, they started to resemble dolls with no strings, pressing their faces against the pane, staring at me dazedly, a vacancy in their eyes that felt like oblivion was staring back. On the day after my 7th birthday, I skipped down to the basement after breakfast to find my father finishing up. He pushed past me, grumbling at me not to get too close. I wanted to talk to Darkhair about my favorite episode of Phineas and Ferb, but when I opened my mouth, I knew something was wrong. The lights were too bright, too in my face. I noticed Goldhair at first. He was sitting cross-legged, head tipped back. I think he was praying. The girl was sleeping, though I could see her shaking. I could hear her sobs. My gaze crept across the glass screen, my breakfast creeping into my throat. Darkhair was wearing Freckles' metal crown. This time it was glued to his head. Freckles hated it. I used to watch the girl try and violently tear the thing off her head, scratching at the cruel pincers glued to her flesh. The boy didn't even notice. Maybe he did at some point. I could see the haunted glint of something alive, something writhing and aware behind gnawing, empty holes staring back at me. The claw marks on his head were evident of that, showing that he too had tried to rip it off. In the days following, even that began to dissipate before I found him standing with his hands on the glass. Freckles' crown was tighter on his head, blood-coated clenched teeth. Blood. Just like Freckles. Goldhair started to barf black.
What's wrong with camping? We need to get the full Coachella experience, right? Tents are like $10 bro. Well, you can go camping and get the full experience, the girl said. Meanwhile, the two of us with brains will get a hotel and avoid getting roofied. That was all they said, the same thing over and over again. The same conversation, the same disagreements, the same laughter, like three broken records. There were three words that I picked up on: Coachella, ticket, hotel. So that's what I named them. I was sick of referring to them as dark hair, gold hair, and girl. After a while, the three started to become a little more responsive. Hey, kid! Coachella surprised me one day with my name. I appreciated that his hair was growing back under his metal crown. He still hadn't aged, his face stuck in time. Coachella knelt on the ground, tapping on the glass. It's Rose, right? Rosie, I corrected him. He scoffed. Same thing. It was my 13th birthday, and I was showing Ticket how to play Fortnite on my Switch. Ticket was ignoring me, curled up on the ground. Hotel was snoozing on his lap. He stopped replying when I delved into Fortnite lore. It's not like he was talkative in the first place, though he did offer small grunts, acknowledging my words. The two of them weren't as responsive as Coachella, who was slowly regaining color in his cheeks, awareness in his eyes. It wasn't the awareness of the boy whom my father dragged down to our basement. It was new, like he was a whole different person. Coachella was the only one who wore the crown of metal. Hotel had a plastic tube stuck in her arm, and Ticket had a blinking device stuck to his left temple. Daddy really was treating their sick brains. I had to smile, and he was fixing them. Come over here, Coachella gestured toward me, knocking on the pane. I blew a raspberry, my gaze glued to my game. Why should I? I could get your mind sickness. I want to show you a magic trick. Oh? I slowly made my way over to the glass. His eyes darkened. Do you know how to get us out of here? Why would you want to leave? Dad is making you better. He let out a bitter laugh, drawing a smiley in the condensation. What if I can prove your dad is a bad man? Something sour filled the back of my throat. My father is not a bad man. His lip curled. Then I'll show you my magic trick. Coachella knocked on the glass, his voice suddenly a lot louder in my head, slowly bleeding into my brain. It felt real, physical, like a bug skittering across the meat of my brain. Don't you come closer. I did, my body no longer in control. In 2 heavy steps, I was standing nose to nose with him. He smiled, and with the jerk of his head, my feet were slowly leaving the ground. I couldn't resist a shriek of excitement, my arms trembling, windmilling. I was flying. Up, up, up I flew, throwing my arms out, led by his surprisingly soft eyes. I was so excited to hit the ceiling when Coachella staggered back suddenly, and I dropped to the ground, straight into my dad's arms. Coachella dropped to his knees, crying out and tearing at his hair. Fuck! I caught a single slither of red creeping from his nose. His gaze found mine, tragic, pleading, and pissed. Sit down, Dad ordered. For a moment the boy refused. He jerked his head again, this time violently, eyes narrowing, but nothing happened. There was a sound like electricity hissing, and Coachella hit the floor, burying his head in his knees. Do not touch my daughter again, Dad spat. I was dragged back upstairs before I could tell my dad Coachella was hurting. The basement was locked, and I was officially forbidden from going down there. It's been a year since I was locked out of the basement. I still heard their screams at night, so loud, raw, and real, like all they felt was agony. I told myself my father was helping them, but for this long? Last night when I jumped off the school bus, Mom was waiting for me. She told me to go straight to my room and already had snacks for me to eat until dinner. Mom said I had to stay in my room all night. Dad was having friends over. I entertained myself for most of the evening, though when it reached 9 p.m., I heard voices coming from downstairs.
My excuse was that I felt nauseous if my parents caught me, though when I stepped into the kitchen, dodging behind the refrigerator, our dining room was filled with men and women in fancy clothing, suits, and cocktail dresses. Drink? The server looked a little too young to be handing out glasses of champagne. "I'm 14, he scoffed. "So am I. What's your point?" I opened my mouth to reply when Dad's voice startled me. "Follow me, everyone." The server was quick to put his drinks platter down, eyes darkening. "Showtime," he muttered, pulling a phone from his pocket. "Thanks for coming," Dad told the small crowd, leading them down to the basement. I followed hesitantly, hiding behind server guy. "Can I please reiterate that electronic devices are prohibited in this space, and if you are caught, you will be paying a penalty." I waited for server guy to dump his phone, but he didn't. In fact, he slipped further into the crowd, grasping the phone in his hand. Against my better judgment, I followed him. After a moment of standing behind the guy, he was either talking to himself or talking to someone else. "Let's start the auction." Dad stepped on stage, microphone in hand. "Auction?" The lights dimmed, small talk and chatter coming to a halt. Coachella appeared, his eyes a lot more animated, alert. I hadn't seen them in a whole year, and they still hadn't aged. Ticket was shoved onto the stage, then Golden Hair. The three of them were decently dressed. The guys wore suits, and
Coachella didn't give up. "Someone, call the cops! Tell them my name is—" Mom kicked him in the face, forcing Coachella into his stomach. When he jumped up, she whipped out a gun, sticking the handheld in his temple. "Starting at 3 million, she said loudly. "Anyone want to go higher?" When a suited old man in the audience raised his hand, announcing a price, I felt sick to my stomach. 5 million! A woman in a fur coat raised hers. 5.4 million! Mom dragged Coachella back, her eyes finding mine. "Go upstairs, Rosie!" I did. I can still feel blood on my face, even now, after so many showers. Right now, the basement is still out of bounds. The auction has been going on for 3 days, and blood still coats the basement floor. Expensive heels tread in human remains, congealed blood. Mom keeps smiling, and these psychos don't even care. I'm so scared. I don't want to be scared of my mother, but I am. I think she was behind the death of my father. I don't know what to do. I'm sitting here and can't stop shaking. I feel sick. Mom acts like nothing happened, but I'm not allowed to go outside on my own. I can go to school, but only accompanied by my cousin. Mom took my phone, but I found my old one in my drawer. Coachella was right. My dad was a bad man, but my mom is fucking evil. And that wraps up today's collection of stories. I hope you enjoyed them. If you did, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and share with someone who loves a good scare. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and sleep with one eye open.